All right. Hello. Hello, everyone. I am Shallie, and today we are going to be having. Whoops, I apologize. I'm a little bit not used to doing things in VR chat. Usually, I usually deliver this panel in person or on my own live stream, so this is a bit different, so I apologize. So today we'll be diving into the world of home vocal recording, and we'll see if the slide presentation is working. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so yes, this is so home vocal recording on a budget. Welcome. You are in the right place. Okay, so let's get started. So I'll talk a little bit about what I won't be covering today. So two things we won't be covering will be vocal performance, because I'm kind of assuming that you, as a performer, are going to be you're going to have this on lockdown and you'll have this kind of figured out for yourself, because every type of performance is a little bit different, and that's and so I don't necessarily have a ton of advice around that. The other thing I won't necessarily be talking about will be live sound. So, like, say, recording and amplifying equipment for like on a stage. Um, I won't be covering that. So today's stuff is all things that you can do from the comfort of your own home, which is relevant because of the time period we are in. Anyway, I will just so people know, there are some breakpoints in the presentation, so I will occasionally be checking the Discord and or the Twitch chat to see if there are questions, and then we'll kind of go from there. So yeah, let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about what I think most people are here to learn about, and that is equipment. So you could kind of approach home vocal recording from a variety of price points. You can go fairly cheap to like just kind of get sound in a digital medium, or you could have a fairly elaborate home studio. So with that in mind, I'll be sort of sharing three different uh price ranges and sort of three different levels of quote quote studio in order for you to get started or do something more elaborate. And so this first one I'm calling the bare bones recording package. This is like the minimum that you need to be able to get sound into a digital medium. Excuse me. It's important to hydrate. So this bare bones recording package assumes that you're going to be doing everything on your phone. So to begin with, you need something to record into. The built-in microphone on your phone may be okay. It depends on your model of phone, but if you're not super happy with that phone microphone, you could potentially invest in a wired lavalier microphone. They clip onto your shirt, and you can plug them directly into the headphone jack of your phone. If your phone doesn't have a headphone jack, they work just fine with an adapter. I will draw your attention to the three black stripes on the plug. You specifically want a microphone with three black stripes because that means that it is compatible with smartphones. If it only has two, it is not compatible with a smartphone's headphone jack. You could spend a variety of pricing on a headphone, on a microphone if you want. Um, the one that I bought originally was about $22, but you could spend as much as $75 on them if you want. Um, and then once you have a microphone, whether that's the one on your phone or that you're plugging into, you obviously need some sort of software to record into. There are free options for both Android and iOS. If you want something a little bit more elaborate, I have some good experience with FL Studio Mobile. That is not just audio recording software, it is a full-fledged digital audio workstation on your phone. And Probably overkill for a lot of people, but if you want something fancy, that is an option for you. Okay, what's next? Okay, and then obviously you need some way to hear what you've done. So the tricky thing is that because you're going to be using the headphone jack for your microphone, you won't be able to hear yourself. So this kind of setup is not great for something like recording vocals for music, but it works very well for things like podcasting, dramatic readings, or voice acting, or interviews, or things like that. Um, but the main thing to demonstrate here is just use what you have as far as the headphones. You probably have a set of headphones lying around, and you probably have a phone, a smartphone of some kind. You don't need to break the bank. As you can see, the image that I'm using here is a Samsung Galaxy S3, which is, I believe, an 8-year-old phone at this point. So, yeah, you don't need to break the bank on a phone. So yeah. Now moving up in the range, we're looking at something that's a little bit more expensive. Um, this package, you're going to be spending the majority of your money on a higher quality USB microphone. Now there are a bunch of different options for USB mics. The Blue Snowball is very popular. I used the Samson C01U for many years. Very good mic. I would not recommend spending less than $50 because below that point, the audio quality of the microphone gets a little bit questionable. But at the same time, no reason why you can't try it, but still, I generally recommend spending a little bit more money. You also don't need to spend more than $100 because that could get expensive. And if you're just kind of getting into it, I don't think you need to break the bank. A lot of these microphones will be just fine for someone who's starting out. As far as other things that go with it, obviously you want a set of headphones. This setup will be using a computer. It does not need to be a super fancy computer. The example here is just like a really, really old budget laptop. So audio recording and music production are fairly light in terms of system resources compared to things like video games or video production or things like that. You don't need a super powerful computer to be able to make music or to be able to just record your voice. Like, it's a very lightweight process. The biggest thing to consider, though, is the software you use. So we have here GarageBand, Pro Tools first. GarageBand, if you're on a Mac, great choice. Pro Tools first is another free option. Little bit limited, but it's okay. Notice that I did say that Audacity is not recommended. This is because Audacity is kind of lacking in the niceties department. It's a little bit clunky to work with. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the same time, I mean, if you're familiar with it, it's okay, but it is, let's just say it's kind of hard to work with. A much easier option that is also free is the one that I pictured here, Traction Waveform Free. It's extremely versatile. It is a full-fledged digital audio workstation. The free version is fully accessible. Like, you can save, load, access different songs that you've made. It's pretty solid and definitely worth your time. What else? What's next? So that's the basics for just general basics of getting started with like cheap equipment. I want to give a small shout out to the field recorder. This is basically a all-in-one device that you can record pretty much anything with. They're fairly cheap, they're fairly small, they don't require a phone or a computer. It's a great way to get sound into a digital medium, and they sound pretty good. Like, I've used this particular one here, the Zoom H1N, for a while now, and I've been really happy with it, and it wasn't super expensive. Now they can get more expensive if you want to get like the Zoom H8 or whatever they're up to now. That gives you more options, more things you can record with at the same time. But this is a good option if you want something a little bit more good for on the go. Now let's talk about the fancier home recording package. This one is if you want to take like music production or voice acting or things like that a bit more seriously. And note the bigger number. The bigger number is difficult because, excuse me, the bigger number just kind of represents the fact that that you could theoretically spend as much money as you want on a home studio. Like you could spend thousands of dollars on microphones and mixing consoles and studio rack equipment and studio monitors and so many other things. But you don't need to. You can get away with, as I've already shown, some very cheap options in order to be able to make what you want to make. So obviously you want a microphone. These ones are a bit different from before because these are XLR microphones. XLR microphones are basically they're microphones that are designed to work with what they call an XLR plug. The difference between this and like a USB mic is like a USB mic that'll plug into your computer. Okay, cool. An XLR mic can plug into everything else. It can plug into cameras, audio interfaces, guitar pedals, mixing consoles, you name it. Pretty much anything that has high fidelity audio recording capabilities has an XLR input. So this will be very useful for you. Most of the time when you're doing home vocal recording, your go-to will be a large diaphragm condenser, like the Behringer B1 pictured here. That's a large diaphragm condenser, works very well at recording pretty much everything. They sound great. They're relatively affordable. Another great choice would be like a solid dynamic microphone like the SM57, which is actually what I'm speaking into right now. So, assuming you can hear me okay, the audio quality of this is pretty good. They're both solid microphones. They sound slightly different from each other, so it's all just kind of personal preference. But if you had to pick one mic to do everything, probably get a condenser. I have multiple microphones just because I'm a hobbyist about this stuff. So, yeah, you could spend as much as you want on these, but you also don't need to break the bank. You could spend like $100 mic is pretty comparable in quality to $1,000 mic. The difference is not as big as people think it is. Okay, moving on. Now let's talk a bit about microphone accessories. So there's a whole bunch of them. Like obviously you need the ability to plug in your microphone. So you need a cable because most microphones don't come with them. They're pretty cheap. You can get away with like a 10-foot cable. That should be sufficient for most purposes. And then a microphone stand so that you don't have to hold the microphone the whole time or have it like sitting on your desk. Very, very useful, very helpful. I'm actually using a microphone stand right now in order to keep everything in place. And then the biggest piece here is a pop filter. That's the big round thing at the bottom. That goes in between you and your microphone to help deal with plosive noise. It also keeps spit off the microphone, which is good. So overall, very good thing to have because it helps you sound more professional and more. It's a more natural sounds that you don't hear like plosives all the time. And they're not super expensive. If you want to, you could make your own, but like the one that I have pictured here is like $15. So don't feel like you need to go above and beyond. It's basically just a fancy fancy piece of fabric stretched over a hoop. It's not a big deal. But they are very helpful. Otherwise you can get a what's it? What am I saying? I apologize. I'm getting a little bit flustered. But so headphones. Obviously you need headphones. Just use them. You don't have to have super fancy ones. Having ones that cover your ears are good. So that way the sound from your headphones doesn't go into your microphone. That's bad. What else? You can obviously spend a lot of money on a set of headphones if you want, but you don't have to. The ones that I'm currently using are the MDR7506 headphones pictured. Obviously you need to have a computer. If you're looking to upgrade or improve your current computer, more RAM and a speedy processor is good. Lots of USB ports are your friend. Whether or not you get a desktop or a laptop is personal preference, depends on what you need. So yeah, pretty straightforward so far. Let's talk a bit about audio software. So I briefly mentioned digital audio workstations before. You could use Traction Waveform Free for this. Indeed, if you're looking to upgrade, you could go with Traction Waveform Pro Basic, which has some nice additional plugins and is overall a solid choice. Some other ones that are good options as far as premium things. Just to sort of clarify, a premium digital audio workstation sounds just as good as a free one. The main difference is that it comes with a lot of additional tools for making music. So things like special effects or synthesizers or virtual instruments or advanced audio processing tools. But for the basics, they're all basically the same. So the main thing to consider here is just choose one that gives you a good vibe. Choose one that you find easy to use and makes sense to you. Beyond that, it's all just personal preference. Also, don't feel like you have to break the bank. Like, you see the one at the bottom that costs $600? You don't need to spend $600 on a DAW. The one that costs $60 is just as good. So, yeah. Next thing is an audio interface. An audio interface is basically the heart of your home studio. It is the tool that allows you to record and listen to the sound going into and coming out of your computer in real time with zero latency. You could depending on the audio interface, you could record as many as 18 or 20 things at the same time if you have to record, say, a drum kit or a choir. But if you're just recording by yourself, you only really need one, maybe two inputs. My current interface, the one that I'm using, is the PreSonus Studio 24C. I used the Focusrite Scarlett for a long time. Also a very good interface. These have two what they call combo jacks, where you can plug in an XLR input or what they call a 1/4-inch input, which is something that you'd use for like a guitar or a synthesizer or things like that. But yeah, these are very useful. These are very helpful, and it's just cleaner, better audio quality. Let's see what else. Here are some bonus extras that you could get, like acoustic treatment foam you could put on the walls to sort of muffle the sound in the room a little bit so that you don't have weird room reverberations. Or you could get fancy studio speakers if you want. But these are definitely optional. You do not need to have these in order to make good music or make good audio. And the main thing with all of this is that you don't need to spend a fortune on a studio. You don't need to be like Hans Zimmer here and have a multi-million-dollar studio. You can have a much more meager studio. This is what you see here. This is actually my personal home studio. It's a lot simpler. It has like a couple guitars, some speakers, a digital audio workstation, not much else beyond that. And I'm able to make all the music that I want to make. So don't feel like you need to go way too far with this. Okay, so before we move on to the next section, I'm going to hop over to the chats. to see if there are questions. Okay, one moment. Checking out the stuff. Gonna look at the stuff. Okay, is there... Do. I'm gonna take a look on the Twitch chat, actually. See if there's anything going on there. Unless you're Hans Zimmer, then you need Hans Zimmer's studio. I agree. Any other questions? Opinions on the M... Oh boy. Okay, so... I apologize, I'm on... What's the computer? You know, on the Mao No Ao AU PM401. Never used it, never heard of it. But probably okay, I guess. What if my microphone is very quiet, even if everything is turned up to max? Okay, so it depends on the microphone that you have. Hello, internets. Hello there. I am looking at you now. So as far as if your microphone is too quiet and even if everything is turned up to max, there may be a setting inside your computer that you can work with. Beyond that, it depends on the kind of microphone that you have. If you have a condenser microphone and you're using an audio interface and is not set to phantom power, aka 48V, then it's not going to work correctly. So if you turn on that 48V setting, it should work correctly. So that's one thing that should help. But yeah, there are lots of different places to change the volume on a microphone, whether it's on the mic itself, or on the audio interface, or in the computer, or on your speakers. Check all of those, like sort of start at the beginning of the signal chain and work through, and you might be able to find your issue. Okay, checking out the things. If your interface, see if there's a pad or attenuation option. Yes, that's a good point. Good call. HyperX headset. Not familiar. Oh, is that the Antlion one? I'm not sure. Any recommendations for avoiding vocal echo in a half-empty apartment? You're literally getting to the next thing on my list. Double checking the Twitter chat, see if there's anything else. Seeing lots of cute emojis. Hope everybody's having a lovely con so far. I think with that in mind, I will move on to the next slide. So let's move on to talking about getting the most out of your equipment. So next slide here. So to our friend's earlier point, you want to start with the room itself. You want to pick a good sounding room, like if you have a choice in which room you record in, pick the best room, pick the room that sounds the best to you. Now, what does quote best mean? That could mean things like if there's excessive reverberation or weird flutter echo, like kind of things you hear. Or if the room is very noisy for some reason. Those are examples of bad rooms. But at the same time, you may not have much control over the room. Like, I pretty much only have one room that I can record in because I'm in a fairly basic apartment. But that's okay. You can make that work. There are ways to make the room that you're in better. So, for instance, you could put, if your room is particularly reverberant, you could use things like carpets on the floors, curtains on the windows. Definitely have curtains on your windows because windows are very reverberant. And then on the walls, you could put up things like blankets or mattresses or other curtains, anything to help muffle the sound a little bit. Having a bed or a sofa or a chair, like a big fluffy chair, definitely a good thing to help with that. If you have a lot of, like, say, plushies or furries, if you have a fursuit collection, you could put those in your studio to help muffle the sound. That would help, I think. What else? If you want to take things further, two other kind of fun DIY solutions are recording in a linen closet. Very, very popular choice among voice actors. So if you have like pillows and blankets and towels and clothing all hanging up in your closet, that's basically DIY acoustic treatment. That'll work very well for you. And then other option would be you could take a chair, turn it upside down on the table so that the legs are facing up, and then you could drape like a large puffy coat or a sleeping bag or a blanket over it, and then place your microphone inside the little space there, and then you have a DIY recording booth. Very, very simple. It looks really weird, especially if you have roommates, but but that will give you a fairly isolated sound, and that will be a big help for you. One moment. Okay. I was speaking with a friend earlier, and they asked about recording in a place where you have, say, noisy neighbors or pets. That's a bit trickier because a lot of those are outside of your control. The biggest suggestion there is if you have a pet, try to put them in the other room, or try to record at a time when they're sleeping. And as for neighbors, if you have some flexibility about when you record, tell them, hey, we are potentially like what's it? You don't even have to talk to them because that's awkward. You're better off, say, just recording at a time when you know they're busy or away. Don't try to record when they're asleep. That'll be disruptive. And say if you have family members or a roommate, just let them. That's a case where you want to let them know, hey, I'm recording something. So if I make a lot of weird noise in my bedroom, that's why. That's generally the best you're going to do. As far as the recording space itself, I've already talked about like carpets and stuff. Definitely recommend things like if you can if you can sort of move your computer out of the way a little bit, that's good. Definitely turn off your phone, remove any clanky jewelry, and that will be a big help for you. Moving on to the next thing is the actual process of recording itself, where you have the microphone and you in the room. You want to basically, ideally, be in the middle of the room because that creates the most balanced sound. Be directly in front of your microphone, and you want to have your microphone sort of pointing down towards where, how do I phrase this? Have the microphone, like the capsule of the microphone, like the grill of it, at eye level, and then tilt it down towards your mouth. That way, it is less likely to experience like breath noises because the air from your face holes goes out and down. So by having your microphone above it, you're not going to have to deal with that as much. And then you obviously put your pop filter there. I usually put my pop filter about the width of my hand from the microphone capsule. And that's a good distance there. And then as far as how far you are from your mic pop filter contraption, that's all kind of what you want to do. Like, that's all personal preference. There are different things for different purposes. So if you are closer to your microphone, which is like what I'm doing right now, I'm actually fairly close to my microphone, so I apologize if I'm a little bit loud. But if you're fairly close to your microphone, it'll be easier to hear you. You'll be able to speak more softly. You'll have to speak more softly. And but it also makes you more prone to like hearing like spit noises or breathing or mouth sounds, which is not as nice. So I apologize if folks are hearing mouth noises right now. I can't really do much about that because I have a mouth. Anyway, whereas if you're farther away, you have to be louder into the microphone in order for it to be heard by the microphone. So it is a trade-off. And then if you're very, very close to the microphone, you get what's called the proximity effect, Like literally my lips are touching the microphone right now. And as you can probably hear, my voice is very bassy and boomy, and you may not necessarily want that unless you want to do like in a world where people are using their microphones correctly. You probably don't necessarily want that, but so yeah, options as far as the placement goes. But like a general rule of thumb, you want to be between 8 to 12 inches away from your microphone. 8 to 12 inches. The way that I measure that is using, as you can see in these pictures, you can either like with my hands sort of like flat like it is, that is about 8 inches away, and with my fingers splayed, that is about 12 inches. Everybody's hands are different, but this should be a good sort of starting point to get you to where you need to be. So that's general mic placement. Other things to keep in mind with recording. Make sure when you are recording yourself, I'm assuming you're recording yourself, make sure you can hear yourself. It makes a big difference, especially in the quality of your performance. Keep your cables out of the way, like I have mine kind of tucked off to the side. Uh, if you make a mistake, that's okay. Mistakes are normal. Depending on the type of performance that you're doing, there are two kind of ways that I think about addressing mistakes. So if you're doing, say, like, oh, I'm voice acting or doing a dramatic reading or things like that, you just kind of do your performance and it's whatever, and then, oh, I made a mistake. You back up a little bit, say the line again, and then you keep going. And then, oops, I made another mistake. You back up again, you say the line again, and then you keep going. It's not that bad. And then afterwards, you edit out the mistakes in post. This is a bit different if you're doing a performance for music. Say you're singing for a song. Um, you want to start the song at the very beginning and record the entire performance beginning to end. And then do that 2 more times. So you want to get 3 full takes of this performance, and then what you do afterwards is you edit those 3 performances together by taking the bits and pieces from each of those performances and turning them into one master take. It sounds really awesome, and that's the dirty little secret of vocal recording is you can make yourself sound way better than you do in real life. So yeah, that is mistakes and then clipping. Clipping is what happens when you have a basically when the microphone when the sound going into the microphone is sort of too loud for it to handle, and it creates just a really nasty distortion sound and really, really unpleasant. So the way to prevent that kind of distortion is by really simply turning down your microphone. I don't want to sound like I mean, it sounds really easy, but like a lot of people just try to just crank everything up to max and then they record everything and it just sounds really, really distorted and terrible. So the better option is to record it quietly and then like turn down the input gain on your microphone or like the input volume control and then turn it up in post so that it's quiet going in, loud coming out, rather than loud going in and clipping coming out, and then everybody's sad. So that's mic placement and general recording stuff. Before we move on to the last bit, I will check for questions. Hopping over to the Twitch chat now. The audio is a lie. Yes, mouth noise. Mouth noises. Boo boo boo. Yeah, so I see some conversations in there about fan noises. There are tools that you can use to uh, help deal with what's the word we're looking for? To help deal with background noise, you could use what's called a noise gate, which is basically it's something that cuts out the noise when you're not talking. Or you could use sort of like there's like audio removal tools that you could use in order to deal with that. A lot of tools have that. Do, 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 do. Voice Meter Banana is your friend when it comes to clipping and stuff. Voice Meter Banana, I've heard pretty good things about. It's not too bad. Oh, hey, I see the. Oh my goodness, the maker of the avatar that I'm using is in the chat. Hello there. But yeah, so I already mentioned audio programs in the chat. Real quick, biggest suggestion for free stuff: Traction Waveform Free. It's your best friend. It's very nice. I think that's all the questions for now. Gonna see, is there another Discord chat that I am missing? Ba-doop boop boo doo 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 doo. I think I'm good. I think I'm good. All right, so let's move on to mixing. So mixing is basically what you do after you've recorded your audio. Gonna take a drink real quick because I am parched. Okay, so mixing. So basically, it's like you have your sound in there, but there are things you can do to make it sound a little bit better after you've recorded it. So let's talk about that. So the first step is audio editing. So that's pretty straightforward. You literally go into your audio software and you cut out the bits and pieces that you don't need to see, that you don't want to include anymore. It's just like editing video, like editing out bits of video. Except you're just editing audio. Like if you bump your microphone by mistake, or if you accidentally, or if like a truck drives past, or if a dog is barking, or if you make a mistake, you can edit those out in post. If you're doing things like a podcast or a dramatic reading, I definitely recommend removing gaps, removing dead air. Like, you don't want pauses that are longer than like 1 or 2 seconds. Any longer than that, and people will think that, like, it'll be really distracting. The ultimate goal here is getting rid of distractions. And then if you need to re-record after you're done, you can do that. Say, like, if you made a mistake on a crucial part and you don't have another recording of it, you definitely want to re-record it. Because it's better to do it over again than it is to try and fight to make a bad recording sound better. So, yeah, don't be afraid to re-record where you need to. Let's see, what's next? So once you have your audio edited as needed, then you need to balance the levels. You need to make sure that everything is appropriately loud. If it's just one sound source, just make sure it's not too quiet, I guess. Excuse me. But if you have multiple sound sources, like say if you're doing a podcast with like 3 or 4 people, or if you're doing a song where you have like drums and bass and guitar and synthesizers and a voice, then you need to take care to balance everything correctly. Because it makes a huge difference if certain elements are way too loud or way too quiet. Just make sure that everything sounds balanced, that everything can be heard clearly without overpowering anything else. If you're doing a podcast, please make sure your intro music is the same volume as the dialogue. I have had so many podcasts where the intro music is fairly loud, but then the people talking are really, really quiet, and then when the outro music comes in, it's also really loud. Please don't do that. It makes everybody sad. It is a bad time, so yeah. Just make sure everything's balanced and reasonably easy to hear, especially in the car. It's important. All right. Next two tools are EQ and compression. I'm not going to talk too much about these here because they're a bit elaborate. There's a lot to cover. I actually have a YouTube channel that talks about these effects in much more detail. But to sort of summarize really quickly, an EQ, or an equalizer, basically gives you the ability to control the loudness of different pieces of the sound frequency spectrum, like the high parts and the low parts. You have some control over that using an equalizer. Like if your voice sounds really, really boxy, that's probably an issue in the lower mid range of your frequencies. That's jargony, and I know that's difficult. So I'll just sort of talk about the one thing that you probably should do if you're going to do anything with an EQ, and that is, as you can see up top, that big cliff down the left side of the EQ. That is what is known as a high-pass filter. Um, that is extremely useful for getting rid of useless low-frequency noise, like truck rumbles or stray plosives. A high-pass filter set at about 100 hertz, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, will get rid of extra unnecessary low-frequency noise that you don't need because your voice doesn't get that low. So yeah, that's the one thing that I would recommend using is a high-pass filter. And then a compressor is basically a tool that you can use to make the quiet parts of your audio louder and the loud parts quieter so that the volume level is more even throughout. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like as far as actually setting it, that's a bit more elaborate. I do have a video on that on my YouTube channel. And but like it is one of the basic tools. It's very helpful. Beyond that, um, I recommend mixing and stuff like that at lower volume levels. You don't want to like overstimulate your ears. It's something called ear fatigue. Ear fatigue is very, very bad. You do not want to have that. And you to help with ear fatigue as well, you want to take frequent breaks when you're doing mixing and critical listening tasks, as they call them. If you have some sort of a reference material to compare what you're making against, use that. So, like if you have a professionally produced podcast, use that to reference against professional voice acting voice acting performances. Reference against that. A professionally produced song, use that as reference material. It's really helpful. And then, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, if it sounds good, do it. If it sounds good to you, you're doing the right thing. That's the biggest thing to remember through all of this. So that's all the material that I had. I am going to jump over to the Twitch chat. Here are my socials if you want to check me out somewhere. If you have any additional questions, my YouTube channel at the top has a boatload of tutorials for home recording and for vocal special effects. I also do music and stuff like that. And so I will hop over to the Twitch chat to see if folks have any questions. All right. Yeah, music in general. Yeah, turning the TV down, turning the TV up. Yeah, that could be a bit difficult. Socials, jingle podcasts, free open source. RTX voice. I've never heard of it before. Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with that one. It's probably fine. Yeah, if you have any other questions, please feel free to let me know. I am here to chat with y'all. Hope everybody's having a wonderful time here at Furality. This convention space is really pretty and really fun, and I love it. Oh my goodness, I hope y'all have had a chance to check it out. But yeah, feel free to I have my, like I said, Shallie Music FX. And yeah, that's all I really had. If you have any other questions, please, I guess, come talk to me in the Discord or at the con. I am here the whole weekend. Yeah, that's all I got. Let's just double check. NVIDIA broadcast. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's all I got. Thank you for your time, everyone.